All right, everybody, here we are for episode 65 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. Due to certain circumstances, we could not be in person today, so we're going to film just an audio version of this week's podcast. So if anyone, the three of you that have watched the YouTube videos, if you're waiting for this one in video, unfortunately, it will not be the case this week. Wayne, though, great news is October's right around the corner. And last year when we did, we started this podcast in July, we were looking forward to the month of Halloween, as a lot of us refer to it as. And it's upon us again. And so this episode, while we're recording at the end of September here, will air on October 1st. So we are going to start off our kind of scary movie talk, if you will. Coming up with the topics for this month was it's been a little difficult just because we did, so many great topics last year. But this week we're going to talk about like kid horror films or gateways. They're called gateway horror films. Movies that kids watch when they're younger that kind of get them into that kind of being scared and creepy, but it's lighthearted fun still at the same time. I want to start off with probably one of my favorite and one of my seminal movies from when I was a kid that really started me off on that weird path so young, and that was Beetlejuice from 1980, I believe it was 89, 88. Oh, I got it right here. 1988. So we've talked about Tim Burton before. We've talked about some of his other movies. But this one, I mean, you've got a great, just creepy setup. Similar people obviously are familiar with Candyman. It's very similar. You say Beetlejuice's name, except you don't have to be in front of a mirror, and he will appear. And he seems to be your friend, and he wants to help you, but he's really not. It was directed by Tim Burton, written by Michael McDowell and Warren Scarron. Perfect name for writing a kid's horror movie. Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, Michael Keaton are your stars. Michael Keaton, obviously the lead. We talked about him a little bit last week with the other guys. We even mentioned Beetlejuice and some of his other movies. If you're familiar with Michael Keaton only from like his serious work, this would be like I would like to see someone go back and watch this and only know him for being a serious actor. Because this was a year before Batman, so this is when he did a bunch of comedies. And he's hilarious in this movie. He's scary in this movie. He's just super all over the place, and it makes the movie so enjoyable. Winona Ryder was just on the rise too, Wayne, and she, would go on to work with Tim Burton and Edward Scissorhands and some other films, and obviously be known for like Heathers and stuff like that, and now Stranger Things. So, I mean, she was great as Lydia in this role. I mean, I think everybody remembers the dance sequence at the end, or obviously also in the middle of the movie too. Go ahead.
That's what I was going to bring up, man. That's when you say Beetlejuice, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Dale.
Yep.
Dale. Daylight. Come and you want to go home. But that song and just the sound effects and the sound mix and the offsetting creepiness of like right after I guess you could say the inciting incident, which leads into the meeting of Beetlejuice and all of that stuff. Like the whole. I guess we got to talk about. I guess we can talk about it. The movie's only 20 plus years old.
It's over 30 years old now.
The couple dies in the car accident, right?
Yes.
And they're getting escorted to the afterlife and all that stuff. Just the way, like I don't know if it's like it almost seems like they're playing on like a saw of some kind. I can't even really describe the sound mix of like the setting of the towns. And you got the weird farmhouse type thing when they're going in to speak with everybody.
Oh yeah, it's like it's an office with like regular secretaries but there's management to talk with, and it's just like this whole other world, the underworld basically, that you're rushed into after what you think your two main characters, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, die, and you're like, wait a minute. As a kid, you're like, what is going on? Why did these two people just die? And it just turns into this really weird, dark, lovely comedic film. And you get, when you're finally introduced to Michael Keaton, probably about 40 minutes in or so, it just the movie just changes, and it's so funny, it's so entertaining. The characters are great. Catherine O'Hara is fantastic as Lydia's mother. Even though Jeffrey Jones isn't a good person, we're not going to talk about that. Look it up. He's really good in this movie, I would say. And he was a common theme in a lot of Tim Burton films back in the day. Of course, Mr. Rooney from Ferris Bueller. So he already, kind of had his own fan base too, I think. And it just, everything with this movie worked. It really just opened, like I said, for me, opened the door to the possibility of just weird, bizarre movies that, like I said, a lot of people consider them gateway horror films that you could show your kid and be like, all right, this isn't something too scary, but it's something that will make you interested later in life and be like, oh, I need to watch something, a little more grown up now. But yeah, it's just a classic film all around.
Absolutely. There's also the cartoon spin-off that was pretty popular in the early 90s.
Yep.
It really kind of made more like the hero, the good guy. So that's what I also think about when I hear Beetlejuice. So
yeah, I mean they tried to get as much out of that character as possible. Warner Brothers did. There's still been talks many years about a sequel happening with the original cast. I just don't know that everyone would be on board for that. But eventually it may happen. Who knows? It would be fun to see Michael Keaton kind of get back into character again. I know he's getting older, but for that character, that doesn't really matter. The other thing too is it was turned into a hit Broadway musical, so there's that as well. A lot of those movies from the 80s kind of got that same treatment where they lived in the zeitgeist for so long that instead of getting a sequel, they're just like, hell, let's just do a musical of it. And from what I understand, it worked out pretty well. But yeah, it's just, seriously, like I said, it's just one of those early movies I saw that really, I think, guided me towards being such a huge horror fan. Another one that we were going to talk about, I know, Wayne, you wanted to talk about this one too, is Gremlins.
Yep.
Gremlins is a classic. Now, it came out when I was 1 and you were 2, so we obviously experienced this movie a little later, I would say. Kids may not know this, but back in the day, things were on TV all the time, and they would constantly play movies over and over again. I know that stuff still exists, but many younger people don't have cable, I don't think. So Gremlins and Gremlins 2 would be on TV constantly, which was great back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was directed by Joe Dante, written by Chris Columbus, the director of Home Alone and two of the Harry Potter movies and plenty of other kid-friendly, either horror or Christmas type stories. Starred Zach Galligan, Phoebe Cates, Hoyt Axton, Polly Holliday, Francis Lee McCain. Dick Miller was also in it. He is a kind of a horror movie icon. Corey Feldman, of course, plenty of horror films. He was in 2 around that time. Gremlins is a story, if you're not familiar, dad is in, he's not actually in, he's in Chinatown, right? That's where it starts off.
That's where apparently, because that's him purchasing Gizmo from the gentleman,
the Mogwai.
Yes.
So he purchases Mogwai, which is Gizmo, and it's like a pet that his son keeps. But then he accidentally, you're not supposed to get them wet, and you're not supposed to feed them after midnight. The good thing about not getting them wet, yes, it's bad to get them wet, but it doesn't destroy them. So he gets wet by accident, and then several more gremlins spawn off of him, and that leads to chaos, hilarity, really I'm not gonna say gory, but pretty violent movie for a kids movie, wouldn't you say, Wayne?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kitchen scene alone is horrifying.
Yep.
The gremlin really freaked me out when I was a kid with the alien type eggs when they hatch and whatnot. It's what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, they were. It was really good practical effects. I think good puppets or whatever you want to say, and they were really creepy. Spike is a great villain in the first movie. A really great foe for Gizmo, and it's just It's just so funny. I mean, like it's funny, and scary. Like when we talked a little bit about this last week when we mentioned Club Dread. If you're gonna do a horror comedy, especially a horror comedy for kids, you got to hit both of them really well. And this movie was hilarious, but it was also very scary at the same time. And I think being able to nail that is why this movie has become a classic.
Yes, sir. Obviously, we got the sequel, Gremlins 2.
Yes, the
which,
new batch.
May not be as great as the first one, but I love it all the same. Like, I know that some people are like, I'm like, are you kidding me? Gremlins 2 is fantastic.
Gremlins 2 is amazing. And people that don't like it didn't understand the direction it went in. But back in the 80s and early 90s, you had, and I'll use Bill and Ted as an example too, you had movies that directors wanted to do sequels, and they wanted them to be different. And the studios didn't get as involved as they do now, to where it's like if you get a horror movie, the direct sequel is basically a ripoff of the first movie. Where back then...
Go
ahead, sorry.
For example, the Hangover movies. First one is fantastic, right?
Yes.
Second one and third one. Second one is just basically a remake of the first one. It's like, come on.
It is, yeah. So, and the third one was... They did different, but they should have done it earlier. Like, the third one was a completely different movie, but it was so weird. Where, like,
yes.
Gremlins for us, I mean, I think, Gremlins 2, what really helped, I think a lot of us kids really enjoyed it, because it was a goofier, weirder, more bizarre movie, but this one wasn't as scary, I don't think, as the first one. He was more going for a comedy. And you get Bill and Ted did the same thing with Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. Two completely different movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which came out in 86. Completely different movie than the first one. Directors had that control back then that they could, they convinced the studio because, like, hey, look, Gremlins was great. Look how much money you made off Gremlins. Just let me do what I want with Gremlins 2. Now, while we sit here and we love the movie, I'm pretty sure financially it was not as successful as Gremlins. So the studio may have been onto something. It wasn't maybe as mainstream of an idea, but it still worked. And JT, our friend JT, who wants to be on the podcast, we'll have him on sometime in the near future. Him and I have talked endlessly about Gremlins and Gremlins 2 specifically because he, like you said, Wayne, like a lot of people didn't care for it. And he really likes that movie as we do. And it's just such a weird movie that it just works. I can't really say much else about it. It works. And I always remember the New York scene where the Gremlins singing New York, New York and dancing.
Yeah.
Yep, because they like take over television, right? That's the kind of idea behind it. They like take over a whole TV network. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. You have to see Gremlins 2 to believe it, I guess, because it's so out there, but it is so good. And also remember too, they're Christmas movies. So not only are they kid horror films, but they're also Christmas films. So you get like a triple threat there out of these movies, and I think that's big because you can watch them any time of the year. Then they're just a lot of fun, and if you haven't seen the Gremlin movies, I definitely recommend checking them out.
Supposedly, there is a short called Gremlins 3: The Dawn of Desmond.
Interesting.
I don't know anything about it. Found it on the internet. Here, let me read this to you really quick. Gizmo becomes a gremlin who teaches the other gremlins about democracy and philosophy. They develop a country. They call it Gremlin Nation. They ban all immigration. They have genocidal tendencies. Gizmo isn't into it. Also, he has a kid with a human woman played by Jennifer Aniston.
Huh.
Has actually made last year, and it's approximately 2 to 3 minutes long. It's a short.
Interesting.
So I'm guessing it's got to be a spoof of some kind, but
maybe.
I don't know. Since we're on Gremlins, I saw this and I thought it was worth mentioning. Who knows?
There is an animated series coming to HBO Max called Gremlins: Secrets of the Mogwai, based on obviously the original property, so it'll be on HBO Max. But yeah, that one sounds interesting, so I have to check that out. Weird stuff. All right, so the next one I want to talk about, Wayne, I don't know if you've seen this one or not. and it's called. So I'll do most of the talking on it, I guess, unless you've seen it. It's called The Gate. Have you seen The Gate?
I have not seen The Gate.
Okay, so it is directed by Tibor Cox. I'm not sure that's how you say it. Written by Michael Nankin, starring a very young Stephen Dorff. It came out in 1987, so he was a child actor at this point. I'll go over the plot. 20-year-old Glenn has a nightmare of finding his home abandoned. 12-year-old Glenn has a nightmare of finding his home abandoned and going into his treehouse only for it to be struck by lightning and collapse. When he wakes up, he finds out that in the backyard, workers have cut down the same tree from the nightmare and unearthed a geode. Glenn returns with older friend Terry to investigate. Though the workers attempt to fill the hole left by the tree, Glenn and Terry breach the surface, finding a large geode. Glenn catches a splinter and leaves a small amount of blood behind. So when he leaves that blood behind, that kind of like opens up a gateway to hell, essentially. So you have these two kids, and I believe it's Stephen Dorff's character's sister, who end up having to like fight off these demons while their parents are away. It might even just be for like an evening. That's how they did it in the 80s. Like, oh, we're going to go out to dinner, and then all this shit would happen. Like Adventures in Babysitting. All this stuff would happen in like less than 6 hours. It was one of those movies I caught, probably similar to Gremlins and Ghostbusters and stuff. I caught on like HBO when I was probably like maybe 10. And I really, really love this movie. I've seen it a dozen times at least. It's so good. It really fills that kids horror film need. There's been other movies similar, like there's one called The Hole that came out a few years back that's very similar to it. But this one, it's so good. There was a sequel. I never did see the sequel. But The Gate is one of those movies that anytime someone's asking me for like, more of a kid-friendly horror film, I point them to this one. It is creepy. It is scary. But it's just so well done. And I feel like it's one of those ones that does not get talked about enough. Like Wayne said, you haven't seen it. But it's definitely highly recommended by me. So if you take my opinion to mean anything, I would watch it. And just check it out, because it's really good. And it's fun to kind of see a young Stephen Dorff running around fighting off demons.
All right. Very cool. Here is my question for you, sir, and I'm not sure what you have lined up for the rest of the segment, but movies like Edward Scissorhands and maybe like even Ghostbusters, would you consider these gateway into the horror genre at all?
I do. And we had this discussion about Ghostbusters before. Ghostbusters to me is a horror film. It's a horror comedy mixed with science fiction. But it also, it deals with ghosts, and how could you have a movie that deals with ghosts and not it be considered a horror movie? And it's the same, like, then people are like, well, what about Casper? I'm like, that works too, but Casper is like I wouldn't call it a gateway horror because it's not really scary, but it's a horror movie, just a kid's horror movie that's not scary. Right. Not all horror films are scary. That is also a misconception. A topic we'll be getting into in October where at some point will be slasher films. I don't consider slasher films to be very scary. I think they're a hell of a lot of fun. They are still horror movies. So what was the other one? You said Ghostbusters, and what was the other one?
Edward Scissorhands.
Edward Scissorhands. Yeah, Edward Scissorhands is basically Frankenstein for a modern generation, right? It's a man who builds a person up in a tower, and that person then kind of comes out to view the town. The town handles it a lot differently because he's a handsome Johnny Depp and not a creepy looking monster, right? So
yep.
It becomes a fascination with them, with the exception of Anthony Michael Hall, who ends up suffering the consequences for that because he's a bully and a douchebag in that movie. Another Winona Ryder one, another Tim Burton movie. I love Edward Scissorhands. I know you hear me say I love a lot, and I try not to use that for movies that I truly don't mean that for. But like Edward Scissorhands is something another one that I grew up on. I watched it more than a dozen times probably. But yeah, if you're right, and I didn't necessarily have that one down, but yeah, that's another kids fantasy horror movie because it's basically the story of Frankenstein. And you get horror icon Vincent Price is the I'm going to put quotes here, the Dr. Frankenstein, even though he's not Dr. Frankenstein. One of his last roles, I believe, Tim Burton wanted him for that movie specifically. and it just has become a classic. I mean, and that's Tim Burton. So many of his early works have become classics. I know like recently he's kind of hit or miss, but with Batman and Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and Batman Returns, even like Sleepy Hollow, in my opinion, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
think about the Disney movie short that was adapted for the Sleepy Hollow Johnny Depp movie. I was introduced to that one at a very early age. I wanted to get on this topic, so when you brought it up, I was like, "Oh, sorry to interrupt you there."
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean that's a good one too. The Sleepy Hollow cartoon. That was one. I'm right there with you. I watched it all the time. Mr. Boogedy, which you can now catch on Disney Plus. That was another one for me. It's basically this boogeyman that's haunting this family. Now I've heard since it's been added to Disney Plus and people I follow and podcasts I listen to, they're like, "Don't watch it because it'll ruin it for you." So I haven't seen it again, but it stays in my memory as a positive memory of something that I enjoyed when I was a child that guided me towards horror films. I mean, we just talked about one last week. It's kind of odd that I picked this topic for this week when we did just talk about Night Books. Night Books is a great gateway horror film for kids, I think. Wayne, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, because it's got that creep factor, but it's not so outright scary that you can't. It shouldn't get well. I was gonna say it shouldn't give your kids nightmares. The witch is a little bit scary there at the end.
She is, yeah.
Hey. I don't want to go too far into it because I'm one that'll drop a spoiler.
Right. So earlier in the podcast last year, we talked about Witches, the remake, which I know you liked a little more than I did, but that's another gateway horror, same with the original Witches with Angelica Houston. Oh, you know what? Here's my next two that I'll talk about real quick. The Addams Family movies.
Yeah.
The Addams Family movies, not scary. They're funny, but they fit in that same vein. It's about a creepy family that does creepy things, but they're hilarious, and they're the stars of the movie. And Raul Julia as Gomez Addams. You got Angelica Houston as Morticia. Christina Ricci as Wednesday, which Wednesday is now getting her own TV show via Tim Burton on Netflix. So, the Addams Family is those kind of... It was original TV show like in the 50s or 60s. I think it's 60s when it started. And it's been like the Munsters, like these... like G or PG horror, basically. So it's not like supposed to be scary, but it takes those monsters that you know and love and puts them in a family-friendly situation. So those especially, I think, kind of could lead you down the path of getting your kid interested in horror. So if you're one of those people that wants like your kid to like horror movies, start with something like that. Because that it's weird enough to where they'll be interested in something else, but it's not going to scare them at all. So I really enjoy both Addams Family and Addams Family Values. I have not seen the new animated one, and I know the sequel comes out next Friday. So if you have smaller kids, show them those and see if they like those, and then work your way up to the other ones. The house. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I got to ask about one that we both love very, very much, and I think it would work. But The Lost Boys. It's introduction to vampires. While it's not so much geared for kids, it is a kind of nice little, maybe for like a teenager, kind of like, oh, you're interested in horror, maybe getting scared? Let's watch this.
I definitely think teenagers will love Lost Boys. Fright Night. Trying to think of some other good like 80s like that are like teen flicks, but those two especially because they're about teenagers. So whenever you could show a teenager a horror film about someone in their same age range, I think that's a good idea. We did talk last week very loosely. We didn't comment much on it about the Lost Boys remake. Now, to clarify, I'm not really looking forward to this, but I do... Wayne and I talked after the show. I do give the benefit of the doubt to at least... so I can at least watch it first before I say anything negative about it. Because as we talked last week, to me, Lost Boys is almost a near-perfect movie. So... it's difficult for me when we see a near-perfect movie getting a remake. And again, it's my opinion. Some people may not hold it in such high regard, but I do. And I know you do as well with The Lost Boys. So I'm a little more hesitant, similar how I was hesitant with the Ghostbusters remake, not the sequel, but the remake. I saw that and I was like, it's fine. For this generation, it's a fun movie. And unfortunately, it didn't seem to catch on as much as they were hoping for the newer generation. So I hope that Lost Boys, even if I don't like it, maybe some people will, younger teenagers will kind of be like, oh, it's a classic for me because it's when I grew up. But yeah, for us, it's remakes are tough, but a lot of remakes, there are some good remakes out there, and people forget that some of the remakes that are really good have become classics now. So I'm always willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and watch it first before I make my full judgment. But for that case, The Lost Boys, the remake, I'm not super excited for. However, I do believe it probably can't be worse than those shitty sequels they made. Even though I love them because it has Feldman in both of them. But they are really bad. So one I just watched recently, the other day, The House with the Clock in Its Walls with Jack Black, Cate Blanchett, directed by Eli Roth. It's Eli Roth's first foray into kids horror. It was pretty good. It's a good, another good gateway horror film. It's about witches and warlocks. A witch hides a clock in the wall to annoy the other witch that he used to live with before he died. And it's about finding that clock, but then someone brings the main warlock back to life, and it causes all this, obviously, this tension and drama and hilarity. There was a little bit too much bodily humor for me in it, but I'm not surprised knowing Eli Roth's kind of sense of humor. So,
yeah.
The Goosebump movies that just came out recently, those were the first one was good. I haven't seen the second one, but the first one I liked with Jack Black. Monster House and Paranorman are two animated kids films that I really enjoy, and they're very kind of creepy and scary. So if you have young kids and you want to show them something that a little creepy that you think they might like, Paranorman and Monster House are definitely up there on that list. As I'm kind of just scrolling through, Corpse Bride is another one. Tim Burton. We've talked about Tim Burton quite a bit. Right now I'm just kind of scrolling through a list, people. So just Spirited Away. That's on this one. I don't know that I would necessarily say that's a horror movie, but it is freaky. So that's another one. It is kind of freaky. Really good.
How about Labyrinth?
Oh, Labyrinth. There's a good one. Labyrinth with Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie. Yep. That kind of fits in the Edward Scissorhands category, I think, right? Because it's a fantasy, but it's kind of creepy and eerie at the same time. Maybe not as funny, but it's still I think a really good, entertaining film. Here's an interesting one on this kid list. I wouldn't have. It's only PG-13, so I guess it does make sense. And this is one of my top horror movies from the 90s, Arachnophobia.
Crap out of me. I hate spiders.
I know, right? And that, this movie, I think that's the reason I like it so much, though, Wayne, is because they kill the spiders. The spiders are the villain.
Gotta love John Goodman, man.
John Goodman is fantastic as the exterminator. Jeff Daniels as the straight main character. When I say straight, I mean not funny. I don't mean as in straight. I mean he is straight in the movie, but that's not what I mean. He doesn't get all the laughs. The laughs go to John Goodman and several other characters. I've always loved Arachnophobia. It's been one of those movies I watch constantly. I just purchased it to have on Vudu. I thought I had the DVD of it and I couldn't find it, so I got it for cheap on Vudu. Just such a good movie. If you don't like spiders, you may feel icky early on, but then when they start to kill them all, you'll feel pretty good about it. Definitely a misconception of the tarantula, though, because we find out later as we got older, tarantulas aren't as deadly as they say they are. Little Shop of Horrors, we talked about that one before. I'm not big into musicals.
One of my favorites.
Yep, that's another good, kind of lighthearted comedy horror for kids. I think it definitely is something that you should show your kids if you want them to go in this kind of direction of liking those type of movies. Rick Moranis is great. You got a great cast with Bill Murray and Steve Martin, as well as a bunch of other actors that pop up through that movie. A lot of fun too. A lot of great songs. Here's one, Wayne, that I'm going to talk about for a minute here. I grew up on this movie. I haven't seen it since I was a kid. It's called Return to Oz. Do you remember that?
Ooh, oh yeah. Oh, who is the actress that plays Dorothy in that? She became really
Firuza Balk from The Craft. Yeah. Another great movie. She's an American History X. She's in The Craft. Waterboy. She's Vicky Valentine in Waterboy.
Yep, she's one of the Band-Aids in Almost Famous.
Yep. She is creepy in this movie. So they made a sequel to Wizard of Oz, and that's what it is. It's not. It's like a direct sequel, and I think it's the book. But they she's really young in this. So as the Dorothy, Dorothy in the original movie was much older. So I don't even remember how they explain it. It's a creepy ass movie, man. That's what I remember about it. It's one of those movies I think that's gained fans as it's gotten older. People didn't like it as much when it came out, but The Return to Oz is one creepy ass kids movie that is definitely gateway horror, because if you could sit through that movie and you could like it like I did, and how weird and bizarre it is, it's definitely then you found your niche. It's such a weird movie, but I remember really enjoying it, and again, watching it several times as a kid as I sat in front of the television a lot, as you can tell. Obviously, Ghostbusters and Gremlins are on this list, which we already talked about. Twilight Zone, the movie, that's another one, because those aren't very, that's not very scary, really. Jaws is on this list, and it's really on this list because it's only rated PG. So that is a movie. I wouldn't necessarily recommend showing it to younger children, even though Donovan's seen Jaws probably a number of times, because my wife watches it all the time. It's usually like our Sunday movie that we put on, either during breakfast or during dinner. So that's another one. It's PG. Poltergeist is also PG. So there are some other kid movies, not kid movies, but other horror films out there that are rated PG that could necessarily. I don't even know why I didn't think of Poltergeist. Poltergeist is perfect, especially if you want them to watch stuff like The Conjuring. Show them something like Poltergeist first and see how they react to that. If that's too terrifying, then maybe wait till they get older to show them something like Insidious or The Conjuring.
Poltergeist scared the shit out of me, so
it's fucking scary, man. It still works to this day. That's another one that unfortunately got a remake, and it was terrible. But yeah, Poltergeist is still, I think, generally a scary film. Here's 1949, The Adventures of Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad. That's the one we were talking about, everybody. If you have seen that, then you grew up at the same time that me and Wayne did. Because it was on Disney all the time. And it's only 40 minutes or something like that, so I think that's why they were able to play it so much. It'll probably be on around this time. It may even be on Disney Plus. Another thing that, the original Dracula from 1931, any of those monster movies too fit the bill, because they're all G or PG. None of them are super scary, but some of them still really work. I only recently watched the original Invisible Man from 1933 over. It's a really good movie, and it's really kind of creepy. I wasn't as big of a fan of Dracula, but I did like the two Frankenstein movies, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein considered more of a comedy. But those movies are, anybody could watch those. I think they're all on Peacock right now. Because Universal owns Peacock. So around Halloween last year, they did the same thing. They threw them all up there for Halloween. So go watch those if see if your kids are interested. I know they're black and white. They may think it's weird, but those are definitely movies I think that you can get your kids into and not feel like they're going to be terrified of them afterwards.
The Wolfman is another really, really good classic monster movie as well. I always was appreciative of that one.
Yeah, see, and I haven't seen that one yet. I have them all, but that one I haven't watched yet. I think out of the main ones, that one and The Mummy are the two I haven't seen yet. But I saw everything else. Saw The Creature from Black Lagoon. That's a good one, too. All right, so let's move on to our reviews
of the week.
This week we have two very different movies. The first one is a new one, and it just hit Netflix, and it's called Intrusion. Let's see. Let me just find the IMDb here real quick. give you the rundown and the notes of it. Let's see. It was directed by Adam Sulke, written by Chris Sparling, starring Frida Pinto, Logan Marshall Green, Robert John Burke, Megan Elizabeth something. I don't see the full cast list here. Megan Elizabeth Kelly. Lots of 3-name people. Those are basically your main characters. So it's a movie that's framed as a home invasion film. Brand new house that this guy, he's an architect, he built for him and his wife. They live out in the middle of nowhere. But the stores are maybe 20 minutes away, so it's not too far. They get broken into one night when they go out. And they come back, they freak out, they call the cops. Cops come, they do their investigation. And then another night later, they get broken into again. And she finds out her husband has a gun. And that he's hidden from her, and he uses that to defend himself, takes out the bad guys. And that's where things start to get a little weird. The movie starts to be not what you thought it was. When all the home invasioning is kind of done in the first 30 to 40 minutes, you're kind of like, wait, so what's the rest of the movie about? I thought it was a very interesting film, Wayne. I didn't love it per se, but I did enjoy myself watching it. I thought the two leads, Logan Marshall Green and Frida Pinto, did a nice job. This is another one we don't want to spoil, because there are some spoilery things that we could talk about, but we won't. But I was kind of okay with it going in a different direction than what I thought, than what even the title says, because intrusion implies, someone is intruding on your home. So that's kind of what the movie pretends to be at first, but it's not really that. So what are your initial thoughts?
I liked it. I thought it was, it was a bit on the, I don't want to say predictable, but I don't know. I thought it was, I enjoyed it. I thought, it had a couple of good moments real quick, but definitely thriller, if you would. I don't know. I'm not, it's not fantastic, but.
Exactly. It's an entertaining film, I think, that people will, enjoy themselves watching, at the least.
Yeah. It might have possibly set itself up for a sequel of some kind, maybe, but I don't really know if it deserves it.
No,
it's possible. Mm-hmm. It could carry on the story, but,
Yeah, it was interesting to kind of see how it all unfolded, I thought. While, like you said, it was predictable and it kind of went the way I think once you start watching the movie, you get what's going to happen. But it was a little different than some of the other movies that have done that before. So I thought that was interesting. I thought some of the things with the house, what had been done to the house, were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you find out this girl is missing, because that's part of it too. There's a missing girl. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. That kind of makes you go, oh, okay, so this is a different movie than what I thought it was. But if you watch the trailer, you're just kind of thinking oh, it's like The Strangers or The Hostage, or there's a Nick Cage one that was like a home invasion thriller. It does follow the pattern of there's always something about one of the main characters that is unknown at the time that you start watching it. So I will leave with that. That is something that this movie does go for. I think it works. I think Logan Marshall Green, I thought he did a good job playing this role. He often gets made fun of for looking somewhat like Tom Hardy. In this one, he doesn't really look as much like him because he's got a longer hair and glasses the whole movie. But I thought it was a solid flick. Not anything that you're going to be craving to watch over and over again. But if you're looking for something to pass the time, it's an hour and a half, and it's enjoyable. And Frida Pinto does a nice job at being scared. So she did. I thought she did well in this film, and I would recommend people just watching it if you're looking for something to watch. So.
Yeah, it's a good Saturday night flick, I guess,
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. All right, so the other one that we watched was a little bit older of a movie. We've been, unless there's 2 brand new movies in 1 week, we've been trying to kind of go back and watch some older stuff. I'm going to start off with, I quite like this movie. even though there are some bad things about it, for sure.
Yes.
I still enjoy myself. It's called Blind Fury, directed by Philip Noyce, starring Rutger Hauer and Terry O'Quinn. Credited as Terrence O'Quinn. But Wayne, go ahead with your first thought that you were about to say there.
This movie just needed a little bit bigger budget, I think.
I agree. That was like my first thought after I watched it, was like, if this movie had more money, it would have been a lot cooler.
Yes. The effects were lacking, but I enjoyed the story. The acting was good.
Yeah.
Like, I believe,
No, for sure. So, to start off, this movie, it stars Rutger Hauer, and it's from 89-90. Rutger Hauer was in Vietnam, and he kind of gets left behind by his military buddy, played by Terry O'Quinn from Lost and X-Files and many other things. And he ends up becoming blind, and he's basically left for dead, but he ends up being saved by a village who then basically teach him to be like a blind swordsman. So it's kind of like a kung fu samurai type movie thing. He then finally comes home like 20 years later. That's where the movie picks up, when he finally lands on like American soil. And he goes to meet his Vietnam buddy, Terry O'Quinn, and he is divorced from his wife, so he's not living at the house anymore. We do find out a scene before that Frank Devereaux, played by O'Quinn, is being held over the ledge at a casino and being threatened to make drugs or they're going to kill his family. So while Rutger Hauer is blind and sitting at this woman's house, we are given I keep jumping back. We are given a scene where he's eating at a bar and he has to fight these guys while he's blind. So we are kind of given a scene that shows his skills and his abilities, so we kind of know what movie we're in for. And then he goes to meet the man, and he starts talking to the wife, played by
the Meg Foster, who's got the most ridiculous eyes I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, they have no pigment. That was why people kept casting her back then, because she was so odd looking, but she was beautiful, but her eyes made her just so like unique, if you will. And she
Foster, for those of you that aren't familiar, and you may not even be familiar with this role, but she played Eva Lynn in the Masters of the Universe movie in 87, 88,
yeah,
I believe.
She was also They Live from John Carpenter.
Yes.
I saw her in something else too. Oh, she's been in a couple Rob Zombie films. She was in the one which one? I forget what the name of it was at the moment. But yeah, so she's not in this movie very long. She's the mom, Lords of Salem. She's the mom, and she basically like gets shot by Randall Tex Cobb, aka the guy from Ace Ventura that Ace steals the dog from in the beginning of the movie. And that guy just won't die. He gets probably like cut and sliced like so many times before he actually finally dies towards the end of the movie by falling.
Very epic Star Wars-esque type scene, and I think the death of Darth Maul.
Yes.
Obviously stolen from this movie, I believe. It is like.
You're right. It's almost the angle and the way he falls. It's almost exact.
Yes.
I didn't even really think of that, but you're right. Maybe George Lucas is a huge Blind Fury fan. So then the blind man is then charged with protecting her son, who they want to kidnap so they can force Terry O'Quinn's character to do the drugs that they want to sell. So it's just like this adventure of him taking... And Rutger Hauer doesn't know this at the time, so he's taking the kid to meet his dad in Las Vegas. Obviously, something's up because he had to dispatch of 2 cops. Yeah, he kills like 2 cops in the beginning of this movie. While Meg Foster's character dies as she was shot by one of the cops or the main bad guy. So it You know, when he cut off that cop's hand, I was like, oh, so that's what kind of movie this is. I'm going to like this movie. Because it was just like kind of body parts getting cut off. And like you said, the effects weren't great. There wasn't spurting blood like you'd like to see, especially from something back in the late 80s, early 90s. Or, you know, something Tarantino did or something like that.
See, you get the hand cut off, though, but then he kills the next cop, and there are no wounds on him at all, and he just goes, falls face first. Like, that's what we're in for.
Right, exactly. Like, certain things they were able to do, and certain things had to get cut due to budget restraint, I'm assuming. Because there are a lot of sword cuts that we don't actually get to see, like, the full effect of. But, it was honestly, it was just fun to see Rutger Hauer have fun with this role. It's kind of almost a buddy comedy with him and the kid at times, too. Because at first they don't get along. And the kid was good. You know, that when you see a movie like this, you start getting to worry, like, uh-oh, if this kid sucks, it's going to ruin the movie. And I thought he did a pretty good job.
Now, Brandon Call is the actor that played the child. He was on Baywatch, and I think he was in... I know he was in The Legend of Ford Fairlane with Andrew Dice Clay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what else he's been in, though. So
yeah, I think this was his first movie, though, right? Because it said introducing Brandon Call.
I believe you are correct, sir, yes.
He was on Step by Step. So he played...
right, yes.
Yeah, he was one of the main kids. Played JT on Step by Step. He was in Warlock. This actually was not his first movie, but it's weird that it said introducing them. A lot of TV shows. And maybe, you know what, he did Warlock in the same year. Maybe this one just ended up coming out first. Oh, and he's only a little boy in Warlock. In this one, he's one of the main characters, so maybe that's why he got that. Then he did Adventures of Ford Fairlane the next year. Then Step by Step was the last thing he's done. And he hasn't done anything since. But he's the older brother, I think.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
I remember him now, yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I didn't realize that was who it was. It's funny, too, because in his IMDb picture, he's a little child. But he more known for being a teenager.
Was he not on Baywatch?
Did I not see it? Let's see.
Maybe I'm getting him confused, as I frequently do, so I apologize for that.
Thunder in Paradise.
Okay, maybe that's where
it looks like a Baywatch ripoff.
Thunder in Paradise. That's the one with Hulk Hogan, isn't it?
Yep.
Second Hulk Hogan reference in the episode.
Anytime we can have multiple Hulk Hogan references.
I to make a Hulk Hogan reference. Now, not so much at all.
No, not so much. Yeah. Oh, it had it had Jimmy Hart in it. Ed Leslie, Jim Neidhart as well. Sting was in it.
Yeah.
Jeez.
No wonder it didn't last.
I've never even seen this show. It looks like they kind of just turned it into. It looks like it was. Was it only like? Or no, it said 22 episodes. Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. The things you find out when you start searching other people. There's a Thunder in Paradise 3-disc set that you could purchase, people, with Hulk Hogan in the front.
22 episodes?
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds about.
Yeah, so I mean, Blind Fury you can find on Amazon Prime. It was definitely enjoyable. It was one of those movies that I probably come past many times and I just haven't watched it yet. So I was excited to kind of dive in, and I'm trying to watch some older Rutger Hauer movies, because I realized that when he passed away like a year or so ago, whenever it was, somewhat recently, that I hadn't really seen a lot of his movies. I mostly knew him from Blade Runner and Sin City. So I was trying to kind of watch some of his older ones. So it was nice to view this and enjoy it too, on top of that.
Right.
We're going to get into what we've watched this week. The main thing I will talk about, and I've talked about it several times, but I'm going to probably talk about this show until we stop doing this eventually, whenever we stop doing this, when we're old men, Wayne, or one of us dies. Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso had its finale, and it was emotional and hilarious and amazing. It's seriously one of the best shows on TV. I know not everybody has Apple Plus, but if you just, both seasons are over now, so go and get a free trial or do it for a month. I think it's only $5 a month. Just watch it. 20 episodes. They're anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes each. It's so good. Such a great show. Jason Sudeikis is really just wonderful on that show, as are the other supporting characters of that cast. And it really just is awesome to see a show like that get so big and win so many Emmys, as it just won a bunch of Emmys, and it deserved it. I mean, it really is just a great show. I really recommend people watching that one. A Million Little Things returned this week, so I watched season 4, episode 1 of that. That's a good drama I've talked about before. Our regular stuff like Law and Order, all the regular shows are coming back. So go check those. If you're stuff you watch, pay attention. You may not have realized it's come back yet. Wayne, is there anything else you watched this week that you wanted to talk about?
Yep, I finished Friday Night Lights, the TV series.
Okay.
Interesting show. Definitely suffered from the writer's strike in the second season, and it went from a 22 episode season down to like 13.
Yeah.
And I believe there was a deal with DirecTV to keep the show on the air for the last 3 seasons, and it kind of suffered from that. Overall, I enjoyed it, but it definitely seemed to kind of dip the last 2 episodes, especially.
Okay.
And your main cast and stars kind of graduate and move on, because it is a high school show. So
yeah.
I did not realize that Michael B. Jordan would play as big a role as he did the last season or 2. So that was cool to see.
Nice.
Much like I talked about Jesse Plemons earlier.
Yep.
When I mentioned. But overall, it was an enjoyable one. Let's see. I started watching Star Wars Visions. Very, very interesting take on the Star Wars franchise. Made it through 2 episodes so far. Definitely Kurosawa influence for the first one, especially.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely check. Definitely interesting takes and different animation styles in each episode it appears. So. That's very cool. There was something else that I watched. Mayans season 3.
Yeah.
It was good, very good, interesting way that the characters are changing and taking different turns. Obviously, Easy's character, the main character, is struggling with things. Obviously, I can't talk too much about it because it's going to kind of put up some major spoilers, but. This is the first season without Kurt Sutter as the showrunner.
Yeah. And
it's different, for sure. The characters are all the same, but definitely it just has a different pacing and feel to it. Okay. But I would definitely recommend Watch. And yeah, that's the big stuff I've been watching. I'm working my way through Friends every now and then, or have it on in the background. I'm about 3.5 seasons in on that, and I get why it was so popular back in the day. I definitely do.
All right. One more I'll mention, too. I watched the movie Riders of Justice, which is on Hulu right now. It stars Mads Mikkelsen. It's a Danish film. And he is a war veteran who's actually, well, he's not a vet at the time. He's actually over in, Afghanistan at the beginning of the movie. His wife and daughter are involved in some sort of accident, and the wife dies, so he returns home to be with his daughter, and then a guy who was on the bus or train with them comes to their house thinking it was a murder, which the police don't believe him. And so then it kind of starts this whole trail of revenge. It's another one that's kind of not what you think it is at first. It's really, really well done. Everyone does a great job in it. Mads Mikkelsen, you can't really go wrong with him at this point. He delivers a fantastic performance. It's really kind of raw and emotional. It's a really good movie. If you have Hulu, check it out. It is also somewhat a comedy. There are some very funny moments in it as well, but it is also very serious at times too. So I definitely recommend watching that one. Next week we will be reviewing the new Jake Gyllenhaal movie Guilty. I watched the remake of that, I watched the original of The Guilty, which is his Jake Gyllenhaal's version is a remake. And it was really good too. And I'll go into more depth about it next week. But that is also on Hulu if you want to catch that. But yeah, that's it for what I've watched. So let's get into the news and notes, and then we'll wrap up the show here. All right. Wayne, Virgin River has officially been renewed for season 4 and 5. So that's good news. Wayne and I both just recently binged through this show. It's a very good drama if you're looking for something dramatic to watch. Ashton Sanders cast to play Bobby Brown in Whitney Houston biopic I Want to Dance with Somebody, which will be directed by Casey Lemons and star Naomi Ackel as Whitney. Casey Lemons we've talked about before. She did Caveman's Valentine, Eve's Bayou, and she's also an actress. She was in Silence of the Lambs. Adam Devine to headline Pitch Perfect reboot series at Peacock. Kristen Bell and Jonathan Groff are going to star in an original movie musical called Molly and the Moon from How I Met Your Mother creators Carter Bays and Craig Thomas. Kevin Hart and F. Gary Gray are teaming up for the first time on a Netflix heist film. So Kevin Bacon is going to star in and produce Whistler Camp, which is about a conversion camp. It's from Blumhouse. So that'll be, I think, somewhat interesting to see that done as that setup done as a horror movie. We've seen it in But I'm a Cheerleader as a comedy, and then I saw it in another movie recently, a couple movies recently, done as a drama. It's obviously a very serious topic and can be very, very careful how you handle that. Netflix buys Roald Dahl's entire catalog. So that includes the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the BFG, and all that stuff. They were already in the works and producing some movies for his properties and TV shows and stuff, so that's not surprising. Sean Astin and Ali Larter are going to star in The Man in the White Van serial killer thriller. Tiger King Season 2 is going to arrive before the end of the year. A lot of people are asking why. Mario Brothers animated film cast has been announced. Chris Pratt as Mario, Charlie Day as Luigi, Anya Taylor-Joy as Peach, Jack Black as Bowser, Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, Keegan-Michael Key as Toad, Fred Armisen as Cranky Kong, Kevin Michael Richardson as Kamek, and Sebastian Maniscalco as Spike. It will be released December 21st, 2022. A lot of people are upset with that casting, especially Chris Pratt, but even the other people. I don't know. We'll see. One of the main things that you point out here when you get an animated film like this that has a bunch of people who have done these voices before, and everyone gets upset for the community, and I get it, but these are the studios looking to put names on a poster. And they've already got a poster with all these names on there, and it's going to look pretty impressive to people that don't know anything about Mario. And that's what they're trying to do, is just make money. So I get fans being upset, and I understand it, but that's just the way the business works at the moment.
I just hope they don't go with a fully, they do the animated, goofy Italian, it's a me, it's a Mario type. It's I don't know, get the complaints on that one, and I'm kind of if they want to use Chris Pratt's voice for just, without the goofy, offensive dialect added to it, fine, but, you know what I mean? Or am I just being sensitive?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I know I'll probably be seeing it in theaters because Donovan loves Mario, and those are the games we play all the time. WWE and MGM are rebooting American Gladiators. Teen Wolf, the TV show, is getting a movie on Paramount Plus. Pilu Asbeck from Game of Thrones has been cast in a key role in the Salem's Lot remake. Here's big news, Wayne. George Clooney and Brad Pitt are re-teaming once again in a movie directed by John Watts, who did the last 2 Spider-Man movies. And last 3 Spider-Man movies, actually. The third one just hasn't come out yet. And finally, Bella Thorne joins Aaron Eckhart in Rumble Through the Dark, which is going to be an action thriller. Release is coming soon. The Tragedy of Macbeth, starring Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, and Brendan Gleeson. And it is written by and directed by Joel Coen, just himself this time. So it's his first solo effort, the first solo effort from a Coen brother. It looks incredible. There's a teaser trailer that was just released. It's all in black and white. It comes out in theaters on Christmas Day, but it'll be on Apple Plus on January 14th. I'm super excited to see this movie. Everyone knows I love the Coen brothers, even if there's only one of them. And that cast, too. I mean, you can't beat Denzel and Frances McDormand.
Mm-hmm.
Horror Noir 2 coming to Shudder October 28th. Horror Noir is a documentary about black horror films and black influence in horror films. It was a great documentary. Glad to see they're going to keep exploring that in the sequel. Night Teeth with Megan Fox, Debbie Ryan, Lucy Fry, Alexander Ludwig, Sydney Sweeney, Alfie Allen, and Jorge Lendeborg, who will be the main character, Jorge Lendeborg Jr., hits Netflix October 20th. We will definitely be talking about that one probably. It's a weird looking vampire movie, like vampire, almost like think Collateral, Wayne, but with vampires.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like this guy has to drive these two vampires around all night. Very interesting story. I'm looking forward to that one. Sandra Bullock's prison drama, Unforgivable, hits Netflix December 10th. Clifford the Big Red Dog releases in theaters and Paramount Plus on November 10th, so they've given that a day and date release, digital and theaters. It's been happening to a lot of the kid movies. I think, a lot of kids still can't be vaccinated, so they feel that that's the best way to go about it. All right, on to the people who have passed away. Nino Castellanova, Italian actor, dead at 84. Anthony A.J. Johnson, actor and comedian, dead at 55. People know him from Friday, I Got the Hookup. A very funny man. Unfortunately, he passed away. Willie Garson from Sex and the City and White Collar, dead at 57. He had pancreatic cancer. Legendary, iconic, inspirational, influential filmmaker, actor Melvin Van Peebles, father to Mario Van Peebles, passed away at 89. Roger Mitchell, director of Notting Hill, Changing Lanes, Morning Glory, and many other films, died at 65 this week. So that's our show for this week, everybody. We appreciate you all listening every week, no matter how many there are of you. It seems like we're getting new people, even if it's just one person a week or whatever. That's fine by me, by us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne.